Tarve, and welcome to another episode. Oh, these are getting bad. Anyway, welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about mechanics, and the footage in the background is from maybe Guild Wars. This is actually a long-time watcher of my channel, and I've never really known how to pronounce it. But anyway, they've got plenty of footage up on their channel, loads to choose from. Might use it for a couple of days. Thank you very much to them, and a link down in the description can be found if you wish to check it out for yourself. Today we're talking about mechanics, as I say, for the third time, and let's just get started. I've got 3 questions here. I did have another question about the lack of guild versus guild in Guild Wars 2. I was sure I saw an interview about some kind of a new map that was coming out that had a guild lord in it that you could fight, but I can't find that at all, and I'm hesitant to talk about it in case I may have just assumed that was the case, because I do remember them announcing that there was going to be like a nostalgic map that was coming out at some point, and a lot of us assumed that was what it was going to be but I can't remember. If any of you guys, if that does ring a bell for any of you guys, if you please just link it to me, I can maybe talk about that next mechanics episode. But anyway, actually before we start, there was a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. Yesterday, I think the question about the Hall of Monuments might have actually been talking about something else that I slightly missed the point. If you are asking, just to clarify, if you are asking if you could go to the Hall of Monuments and get those points even if you didn't own Eye of the North in Guild Wars 1, let's say you just owned factions and not Eye of the North, no, you can't get the points even though you might have earned some of them by playing factions. You need to have Eye of the North. It was kind of ArenaNet's way of saying, originally when Eye of the North first came out, of saying, hey look, you should definitely buy this because all the progress you made in the earlier campaigns will now count for something. It was definitely a marketing thing, and now as time's gone on, it seems a bit weird that you would still need Eye of the North, but you do still need it, and at the end of the day they are a business, so I guess that's what they're doing there. You do need to own the expansion to actually put the points in to then receive your rewards in Guild Wars 2, so just to clarify on that. Also, I talked about how it seemed like you could get to the Eye of the North in the Guild Wars 2 map, and a couple of people came back and said, oh no, it looks like you still can't. That's still not confirmed that we can't. Looking at the map myself, you can look at, I know exactly where the Greenwich Courthouse is because I played there in the beta, and you can easily from there map to about where Yak Spend would be, and then from there the Central Transfer Chamber, the Burial Station, and the Eye of the North itself as well. And to me it looks like it is possible. It could be up there. There's no way for us to know that we can't be up there, though that is perfectly valid. It's not confirmed that we can reach the Hall of Monuments up there. It's certainly not, but that's just if we can. It'd be very interesting to see the way that they handle things. But anyway, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about from before, and let's move on. The first question is by Meaver316, who said, something's got me thinking. If you can, as you say, create your rewards as many times as you like, doesn't that imply that they won't be level appropriate for you? If I don't have the Hall of Monuments rewards, then I have to buy or craft armor or weapons as I progress. But if I do, I go to my hall and get new stuff level appropriate and free, giving me an unfair advantage. So either they aren't level appropriate or they cost a fee. Which would you prefer, or do you have another idea? Just wanted to bring this up. The idea here is that you would be using transmutation stones to have these items with the stats that you actually want them to be at. So all of these things could appear and just be purely cosmetic. They could have literally no armor value on them. They could have no perks, nothing whatsoever. They're just a skin when you originally get them. But by using transmutation stones, you can then combine that skin with the stats of a different item that you've already found, and thus make it appropriate for your level. So it's a different system that they built into the game, which they're now kind of using to make these rewards work without having to make them all be immediately perfect for your level. So they've kind of got around it by using transmutation stones. There is that expectation, I suppose, that some people will complain about and be like, oh, well, I've earned the rewards, why do I have to use transmutation stones? To be honest, I couldn't care less about that. I think it's just nice that we've got the option to do that, and hey, if it can turn those things into a small gold sink, then fine, whatever, I'm not too fussed about it. But very quick question here really that we're opening up with, but I think some people maybe just weren't 100% aware of how exactly that would work. I'm assuming, I think we're all assuming, because they haven't really 100% announced this, that it will be through transmutation stones, and it's unlikely that this will all start at max level straight away, because then of course you're not going to be able to enjoy it until you're at a level appropriate for it, which would suck. The next question was from Z Lobster, who by the way has also got an awesome name, said, how much will ArenaNet focus on developing PvE? It's obvious that the game will end up being PvP at endgame, but I'd very much enjoy the game more if they implemented some kind of system that kept people running dungeons. Also, do you think they will ever consider creating larger dungeons with more people? World bosses are all well and good, but you have to wait for them to spawn and then hope other people join in. I would enjoy world bosses in an instant environment with friends. I think you're right, actually. The more I look at it, the more I do think that they are missing out. Putting the big bosses out on the world, they do lose something there. I think that's one of the most exciting prospects about going into dungeons and instances like this, that you can find this amazing boss at the end. And that was really, really fun in the few situations where that happened in Guild Wars 1 as well. And now that's just not there in Guild Wars 2. I think that the PvE endgame is lacking because they have just thrown this stuff all out onto the surface world. And some people will argue and say that bosses like the Shatterer, these big raid bosses essentially that are now out in the world, still you have to do a lot to get them to spawn, so you still get that enjoyment of working towards having them spawn like you would have the enjoyment of travelling through the dungeon. People do make that argument, but I don't think it pans out 100% because you don't necessarily have to have made all that progress yourself. You could just be in the world in the general area at the time and someone else has gone and done all of that, and now you're just getting to enjoy the Shatterer, shall we say, who spawned and you did nothing for it. Likewise, some people might come along, push the chain in a certain direction, then you just take over towards the end. That whole idea of a long slog with a lot to lose, if you wipe near the end then you're going to lose everything, all that tension, all that enjoyment that comes out of that, and the difficulty isn't actually there from the world bosses in the real world. So I do think they are missing out. But having said this, there are a few people, not to name names, that seem to think that Guild Wars 2's PvE just is not going to have an end game, and they say, oh, it's just about the PvP. Guild Wars 1 was only about the PvP. PvE may as well not be there for an end game. You may as well not care about it. I don't think it's a black and white of that, and I don't like how some of the community is starting to think that way as well. I honestly do think the PvE will have stuff to offer people, even though it doesn't have a gear treadmill that's going to have you maybe replaying the dungeons that are going to be there in the game as often as you might be in other MMOs that do encourage that thing a lot more. I think there will still be a lot of PvE stuff and a lot of incentive to play in the PvE world, because it's not just about the raiding or the dungeons anymore. That's not the whole end game. This is not as structured as other MMOs where you'll get to level 80 and all of a sudden the only reason you'd want to keep playing PvE is because of this thing that they've set up that they're calling end game. With everything that they're doing with the scaling and the way the dynamic events can change so much of the world, so you walk back like a week or a month later in game and things are so different, it really will, I'm hoping at the very least, encourage people to just play other areas of the game a whole lot more. And I think that's going to be a big part of end game, if you really want to call that PvE, and people will keep playing PvE Guild Wars 2. It's not all just going to transition over to PvP and that'll be the end of that for PvE. I really don't think that's going to happen. I don't like that some people are coming up with it. Honestly, all they have to do is keep adding in more achievements that are earned through places outside of the dungeons. The dungeons are a part of the end game, certainly, and that prestigious armor you get there is a part of the end game, but only a small part for Guild Wars 2, I would say, especially in comparison to how much emphasis is put on it in other MMOs. When I was playing in the beta, I found an area in Ascalon that when you climbed up, there was no skill points, there was nothing on the map that guided me there, but when you climbed to the top of it, you got a hidden achievement. You got a hidden achievement out of nowhere. Now, if these things are continually, which at the end of the day are very easy to be added into the game, little achievements for stuff like this, just around the PvE world, people are going to want to go for them. They've been quite clever with their achievement system in that now you get a total amount of points, and really people are going to judge you and value, and if you care about achievements and all that kind of prestigious stuff like you're going to be going for in other MMOs, it's all going to be about getting these numbers higher, and you can achieve those numbers and get more numbers through all kinds of stuff in the PvE world that really will just encourage people to be doing all kinds of stuff at the end game around a lot more of the content than you'd find in other MMOs. So I have no worries about endgame PvE. I really don't. I have some worries that the dungeon system won't keep people playing PvE for as long as it possibly could, but that's not the only facet of endgame PvE at all, and we shouldn't ignore the other bits. As to what you really open this with, how will they focus on developing PvE? I've kind of talked about this before. They've been quite transparent about it. The idea is they're going to be splitting 50-50. Half of them are going to go off and make more boxed games that you will buy. You'll pay like full price for it, just like you bought the original game, and that will take you to like entire new continents possibly, or unlock new regions on the map. And then the other half are just going to be adding more events and more stuff like that into the game, more smaller bits of content that are just littered all over the place, which is interesting because a big part of events are that they allow the in-game world to look very different after a while, because different events could be affecting it. And their idea with this other 50% they're going to keep working and adding more events in is that after 3 months, if you were to replay the game, because of all these new events as well as the original events being at different stages when you return, and it can feel very, very, very different when you're playing back through, which should add a lot to the replayability of the game. So obviously you have to take what the developers are saying with a pinch of salt about how they're going to try and do more content. They're not going to put out godly amounts of content that you wouldn't see other MMO companies doing, and I wouldn't want to get anyone's hopes up and suggest that ArenaNet are going to be adding, you know, tons of quests every week, because it's probably not going to happen. But that is the general thing that they're going for, and I think that, you know, over the lifespan of the game, it will make a big difference to the replayability of PvE and new stuff that's going to be in PvE and how it's going to be developed. And I think that there is enough there to keep people playing the game solidly as their primary MMO without ever touching PvP, because PvE does have enough as an end game, but it's just not a raiding end game, which I think some people are still conditioned to think. They see a problem with the dungeons and then they say, oh, PvE is just destroyed, and that's not true. There's more to PvE than just the dungeons this time around. Though, having said all that, I do think that they still should work on the dungeons. It doesn't excuse them for the problems that might arise there. Anyway, the last question for today is from David West, who said, the lack of the turning animations on pets and mobs is a bit bothersome now that I've noticed it. It's especially evident on larger mobs like oak hearts. When they turn, it's always instantaneous, doing a complete 180-degree turn in the blink of an eye. I'm aware that adding turning and strafing, etc. animations for all mobs would be a huge unnecessary drain on resources, but do you think they'll add a spinning on the axis type animation like you'd see on large dragons from World of Warcraft? I would love them to do this. There are two things that are really not annoying me about the enemies in Guild Wars 2, and they've added so much animation quality and polish into certain areas of the game, and then there's other things like this that are just, as soon as you notice them, which unfortunately you probably all will now if you remember anything I'm saying on this video when you next get into the next beta, they will just ruin it all. You can have all these flashy, amazing animations on the Asura, but any immersion or anything that's built up from that in the game is immediately destroyed when you see the oak heart in front of you just start jolting around and looking terrible. I mean, it's a bit like some of the sharks we saw in some of the alpha stuff, just spazzing all over in the water, and it reminds me of that. It's bad. I mean, they definitely haven't developed these 180-degree turns in as many places as they should have. I think that the reason for this could be that they're really scaling all enemies that they've created in the game up as it is at the moment. So you could have what's usually a very small enemy, and the fact that they don't have the turning animations isn't so bad. Let's say it's a squid. It isn't so bad because it's quite small and they move quite fast anyway, and you're not really going to notice it. But every single enemy in the game kind of has the potential to become a veteran or a champion at some point, or be a part of an event where they get a lot bigger. And all of a sudden, because every single enemy has the potential to be bigger, and then the potential to need the turning animations, they've just kind of blanket said, no, it's not going to happen. But certainly things like oak hearts, they need turning animation. It's just, they can have all the polish they want, but if it's not there, it's just going to annoy the hell out of me. It certainly is now that I've noticed it. And it's a massive drain on resources. It really is. But I think this is one of those things where they've spent so many years telling us that the game's not going to come out till it's ready. Well, alright, now don't skimp out now. Fine. Alright, make sure the animations are in there. The turning animations are nice and ready so that the game is ready when it comes out. You're skipping out on quite a big thing there that's going to annoy me. I know. Maybe it's personal preference. It won't annoy other people so much, but it's going to annoy me. The other thing, by the way, which you will also notice after I tell you now, is bigger enemies. Every enemy in the game, whenever it's hit or takes some damage, will flash white. And that's to add a little bit of flashiness to the combat system, right? To make it, oh, look, you've done damage. Add a bit of impact to every blow. However, when an enemy gets big enough, like the Shatterer, all you are going to be seeing on those giant bosses is, and you'll be surprised if you haven't noticed it yet, because as soon as you see it, it's almost impossible to get back out of your head. It's almost impossible to ignore. Every single big mob will be flashing white constantly, literally all the time, just flash, 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 flash. It looks ridiculous, and once you have seen it and once you've noticed it, you wonder how it took you so long to notice it was there in the first place. It's ridiculous. I would love them just to, for the bigger enemies, smaller enemies it works quite well, but for the bigger enemies, all those big bosses, get rid of that white flash, please. It's terrible. It looks horrible. It really, really does. So that's another thing that kind of annoys me. These two things are just two kind of problems that with enemy polish, I would say, that just need to be fixed for the launch of the game. And I wouldn't mind if they put off the release date. Once again, I said this quite recently, I wouldn't mind, don't have my head for that, but if they put off the release date to sort that kind of little things out, those are little things that people will notice, and will just make the game feel all round more polished and complete at launch, which is really what an MMO needs these days. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's Guild Wars 2 Daily for today complete. Once again, I do have this guild versus guild question thing, which I might go back to next time we have a mechanics episode, but yeah, please feel free to leave in the comment section any questions questions you might have about lore, suggestions for a lore spotlight. And that's about it. I don't know, but probably in the next couple of days, one of these days, Guild Wars 2 Daily probably won't come out because it's going to be on that day that the first episode of the summary series comes out. I don't know whether it will be Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I really don't know just yet, guys. But yeah, one of those days we'll have the summary out and then we'll be straight back into Guild Wars 2 Daily. I'll tell you more as we come closer, and it is getting closer now. So yeah, anyway, thanks very much, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice evening.